She walked into courtroom 2B like she owned the place. But Officer Dana McKee didn't know the sharply dressed black man near the bench was Judge Marcus Ellison. When she slapped him without warning, thinking he was just another defendant, her world collapsed. The courtroom froze. Phones recorded. The internet erupted. But this wasn't just one slap. It was years of racism unmasked in a single moment. For Judge Ellison, silence had followed him his whole career. Until now. Watch what happens when dignity faces down prejudice. Subscribe for more stories others are too afraid to tell. With truth at the center. He wasn't supposed to be there. Not like that, not dressed like that, not speaking with authority, clarity, presence. That's what Officer Dana McKee thought the moment she stepped into courtroom 2B and saw him. Tall, composed, a charcoal gray suit sharp against his skin, speaking quietly to a young attorney. Her training didn't kick in. Her prejudice did. Before anyone could blink, she crossed the room and struck him. Open palm, full force, the crack echoed like a gunshot. Paperwork fluttered to the ground. A pen rolled beneath the bench. The room froze. And then came the voice, measured, calm, dangerous in its restraint. "I'm Judge Marcus Ellison, and I'm presiding today." Time didn't move after that. No one breathed. And Dana McKee, whose badge had always given her permission to act without consequence, stood exposed in front of everyone. No excuses, no alibis, no shield to hide behind. But this isn't just a story about a slap. This is the story of what happens when racism, long buried beneath protocol and paperwork, finally erupts in front of cameras that won't turn away. Judge Ellison didn't lash out. He didn't demand her arrest. He didn't scream. Instead, he walked into his chambers and waited. Not for vengeance, but for the system to show its true face. And show it did. Within hours, the footage flooded every screen in the country. No commentary, no edits. Just a white cop in uniform striking a black judge, on the bench, in his courtroom, during active proceedings. At first, the internet argued. Surely it was staged. No one could be that reckless. But then came the name. Judge Marcus Ellison, Harvard Law. Decorated civil rights litigator. Now a sitting judge in Franklin County. This wasn't fiction. This was fact. And the woman who hit him? Dana McKee. 10 years in uniform, lauded in department newsletters, given awards for community toughness, backed by a chief who once said she was exactly what this department needs. But now? Now no one wanted their name tied to hers. The deeper people dug, the worse it got. Stories poured out, unofficial complaints, internal memos, testimonies from drivers, mothers, teens. A black man pulled over for no reason in the rain, made to kneel because he fit the description. A Latina grocery clerk humiliated on camera. A 16-year-old slammed into a cruiser window for talking back. They all had one thing in common. Officer Dana McKee. She had power, and she used it like a weapon. And no one had stopped her. Until now. Judge Ellison didn't go public. He didn't give speeches. He didn't threaten. He just kept showing up to work, his presence like gravity, silent, steady, unshakable. And the world noticed. In every headline, every reposted clip, every teary podcast episode, one truth cut through. This wasn't a mistake. It was muscle memory. Dana McKee didn't slap a man. She slapped the idea that a black man could hold authority in her space. She didn't see a judge. She saw a threat to her power. And the uniform she wore had always reinforced that vision. But that day, the badge didn't shield her. It exposed her. The Civilian Review Board held a public hearing just 2 weeks later. Hundreds gathered. Protesters, legal scholars, high school students, former arrestees, every seat was filled. Dana walked in without a badge, without a weapon, just a black suit and a lawyer who wouldn't meet her eyes. Judge Ellison sat in the second row, silent. When called to speak, he rose, not to shame her, but to make it plain. "That slap wasn't surprising," he said. "What's surprising is that it took this long for someone to see it." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The room already knew. One by one, the stories came out. A fellow officer, pale and shaking, describing how Dana once bragged about planting evidence because that kid was going to run eventually. A mother, voice trembling, recalling how her 12-year-old son had nightmares for months after a routine stop turned into a screaming match and cuffs. Dana sat frozen, jaw clenched like always. But this time, there was no podium to stand behind, no commanding voice to drown out the truth. Just silence. Heavy. Accusatory. Real. When the board returned with their recommendation, termination, revocation of benefits, and referral for criminal review, Dana didn't flinch. But her eyes, once steely, had lost something. Not fear, not regret, just recognition. The kind that comes when you finally see the edge of the cliff you've been walking blindly toward your whole life. "And Judge Ellison?" He stood up and left. Not triumphant, not bitter, just quiet. Because he knew what this moment meant. Not just for him, but for everyone watching. Across the country, the story stuck. Not because of the slap, but because of the silence that followed. The dignity with which Ellison responded, the ugliness it revealed, the shift it sparked. Departments reviewed complaints. Cities restructured oversight boards. And in Franklin County, something subtle but powerful changed. People stopped mistaking quiet for weakness. They started asking better questions. About power. About race. About who gets to feel safe and who's forced to prove they deserve to be. And Dana? She disappeared from headlines. No comeback tour. No interviews. She moved 2 counties over and took a job in private security. Her name faded from search engines, except for that one clip. That moment. That reflex. Her legacy, sealed in the frame of a courtroom, under fluorescent lights, next to a man she tried to erase, and instead elevated. If you've made it this far, ask yourself, how many more Danas are out there? How many more judges Ellison stand in silence, waiting for the world to see? If this story made you feel something, rage, sorrow, hope, subscribe to the channel. We tell the stories others are too afraid to touch, and we don't stop at the slap. We follow the silence all the way to justice. She didn't grow up thinking the world was fair, but she believed in trying. That was her father's voice in her head, soft and weathered from decades of construction work and unpaid overtime, telling her, "Maya, this world will come for you harder than most, but don't you ever let it break your back." So when Maya Ellis passed the bar after her 3rd attempt, while working nights at a diner, caring for her sick mother, and raising her younger brother after their dad died, she walked into Franklin County's courthouse with hope stitched into every thread of her cheap department store blazer. She thought the law would protect her. She thought hard work would speak louder than fear. But Maya didn't realize that in places like this, being a young black public defender wasn't just a job. It was a challenge to the system itself. Every morning, she walked past rows of faces that didn't see her, or worse, saw too much. Her first week, a senior prosecutor accidentally called her Missy in open court. Another time, a judge openly doubted her credentials in front of her client, saying, "You sure you're licensed to be here, counselor?" No one corrected him. No one flinched. And Maya, jaw tight, voice steady, said, "Yes, Your Honor, I am." But that was the easy part. The real pain came from watching the wheels turn, the way poor black and brown defendants were tossed into plea deals like meat into a grinder, how the system wasn't broken but built this way on purpose. And she was supposed to help them. On a shoestring budget, with outdated case law, and clerks who always lost her motions but never their golf invites. Still, she showed up, every damn day. And then came the Jefferson case. 17-year-old Darnell Jefferson, arrested for having 2 vape cartridges and an attitude. No priors, no violence, just a kid in a hoodie at the wrong gas station at the wrong time. The arresting officer was Dana McKee, blonde, sharp-jawed, and infamous for her zero-tolerance stops in high-risk neighborhoods. And Maya had seen her before. Always the same smirk, the same aggressive reports, the same unshakable authority that kept her bulletproof inside the department. Darnell swore he was innocent. Maya believed him. But when she requested the body cam footage, she was told it was corrupted. When she subpoenaed dashcam, it mysteriously arrived incomplete. When she pushed harder, a senior partner warned her gently in the hallway, "Pick your battles." But she didn't know how to stop. Not when Darnell's mother looked at her with the same tired, aching hope Maya saw in her own mother's eyes every time the medical bills came. So she dug deeper. She found old complaints against McKee, dozens of them. Buried, closed without comment, filed by people who never stood a chance. Maya brought it up in pretrial. The judge dismissed it as irrelevant to the current case. She appealed. She lost. And when the trial began, McKee stood on the stand, cool and collected, spinning her story like truth wrapped in steel. Maya tried to cross-examine. Objections flew. The jury didn't blink. And when they convicted Darnell, Maya broke, for the first time in public, outside the courthouse, crouched behind a row of hedges, trying not to cry loud enough for the cameras to hear. But the pain wasn't just about losing a case. It was about watching an innocent boy look at her like she'd failed him. Because she had. After that, something changed. She couldn't sleep. Her mother's health got worse. Her brother got suspended. Her car broke down. Her landlord threatened eviction. And in court, the air grew heavier. Judges interrupted her more. Clerks gave her the wrong files. Her caseload tripled. She went home most nights, shaking. Not from fear, but fury. How could they keep getting away with it? And then, weeks later, Maya found herself back in courtroom 2B, not as Darnell's lawyer this time, but as an observer. She was covering for a colleague, watching a minor drug possession hearing when Officer Dana McKee walked in, jaw clenched, uniform perfect, and spotted a black man standing beside the witness stand. No hesitation, no warning. She slapped him. Open palm, full force. The courtroom gasped. Phones came out. Time froze. The man calmly adjusted his tie and said, "I'm Judge Marcus Ellison, and I'm presiding over this courtroom today." Maya's heart stopped. The silence that followed wasn't shock. It was justice, finally speaking. She watched McKee stumble, her face pale, eyes wide, realizing what she had done. Maya didn't move, didn't speak, just pressed record, hand shaking slightly. She didn't do it for the clicks. She did it because the system never believed people like her without proof. And this was proof you couldn't erase. Within hours, it was everywhere. By noon, the footage went viral. No edits, no commentary, just raw truth. A white cop striking a black judge. It didn't need context. It was context. And while the country argued, Maya sat in her car outside the courthouse and cried. Not for joy, not for revenge, but because for the first time, the world saw what she saw every day. The quiet brutality, the subtle theft of dignity, the abuse hidden behind badges and paperwork. But it didn't end there. Because when the floodgates opened, Maya didn't just watch, she acted. She wrote a formal statement. She testified to what she'd seen in court. She submitted Darnell's case for review, attaching every redacted complaint she'd unearthed about McKee. Her inbox exploded. Threats, praise, interviews. She turned them down. She wasn't interested in being a headline. She just wanted the system to change. But the backlash was real. One morning, she found her car keyed. Another, her office filled with shredded papers. Her boss warned her to be careful who you make enemies with. But Maya kept going. When the Civilian Review Board scheduled the public hearing, she showed up early, sat in the front row, watched McKee enter. No badge, no confidence, no armor left. And when Judge Ellison spoke, calm and firm, Maya felt every word hit like a drumbeat in her chest. That wasn't fear, he said. That was a reflex born from unchecked power. And Maya knew he wasn't just talking about himself. He was talking about all of them. Every defendant, every scared teenager, every ignored lawyer who dared to challenge the machine. When McKee was stripped of her badge, her benefits, her silence, Maya didn't cheer. She sat in her car for a long time afterward, holding her mother's hand, who by then needed a wheelchair just to leave the house. "You okay?" her mother asked. Maya nodded. "I'm just tired, Mama. Tired of fighting." Her mother squeezed her hand. "But you didn't lose, baby. You lit something up." And maybe she had. Because after that, changes came. Not overnight, not everywhere, but enough. Darnell's conviction was overturned. Bias training actually started to matter. Prosecutors began speaking up. Maya got assigned to a mentorship program for new black attorneys, finally seen not as a troublemaker, but as a builder. She still works long hours, still fights losing battles, still has nights where she cries alone in the shower so no one hears. But she also walks into court with a little more hope now. Because one day, a kid like Darnell might walk free. Not because of a loophole, not because the evidence vanished, but because someone finally listened, someone finally watched, and someone finally believed. If this story moved you, if Maya's fight made you feel seen, subscribe to the channel. We tell the stories others are too afraid to touch. The ones built not on spectacle, but on truth. Because justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it bleeds. And sometimes it begins with one woman refusing to look away. Lewis Randall never expected to find himself on the other side of the law, not as a criminal, but as a target. He was a decorated civil rights attorney, the kind of man who showed up when others stayed silent, who stood in courtroom hallways long after the cameras stopped rolling, comforting mothers who lost their sons to the system, shaking hands with kids whose futures he'd fought to protect. He didn't do it for praise. He did it because justice had to mean something. For 10 years, he stood up against wrongful convictions, corrupt officers, and systems designed to break the very communities he'd come from. But nothing, none of it, prepared him for what happened when he exposed the truth about the Franklin County Police Department. The leak was clean. The evidence was solid. Dozens of cases tainted by fabricated reports, falsified evidence, and officers caught on tape targeting people of color during routine stops. Louis didn't name just anyone. He named the ones in charge. A captain, a deputy chief, a judge. The press called it the Blueprint Files, an explosive dossier that pulled back the curtain on 10 years of manipulation, suppression, and injustice. And at the center of it all, Officer Dana McKee, the same officer whose courtroom slap would later go viral for hitting a black judge. But Lewis had released the report before that moment ever made headlines. He'd spent 18 months compiling it, double-checking names, building timelines, protecting sources. And he knew the moment it went live, his life would never be the same. At first, he was hailed a hero. Protests erupted across the state. Former defendants cried on camera. Civil rights groups issued statements of support. But within days, the backlash came. Quiet, subtle, strategic. A smear campaign disguised as concern. Anonymous tips, rumors about missing funds. An internal audit of Lewis's old cases. Then came the lawsuit. A counterclaim filed by 2 of the officers he exposed, accusing him of defamation, obstruction, and conspiracy. Conspiracy. That word stung the most, as if seeking justice for others made him a criminal. He tried to laugh it off at first, but inside the fear crept in. Not for himself, but for what it meant, for the message it sent. That even truth had a price. And maybe he couldn't afford it. Sleep stopped coming. Phone calls from his mother went unanswered. Friends he'd known for years stopped returning his texts. His law partner, Denise, tried to stay strong, but even she looked at him with the weight of fear behind her eyes. "They're trying to break you," she said one night, quietly, as they reviewed documents under a flickering lamp. "And it's working." Lewis didn't respond. He couldn't. His chest was too tight. His throat felt like gravel. In private, he broke down. Alone, in his car, in the middle of a rainstorm, whispering to himself, "I did the right thing, didn't I?" He used to believe truth had power. But now, power seemed to have rewritten truth. The courtroom where the countersuit played out wasn't just a place of judgment. It was a battlefield. The same judges he'd stood before 100 times now avoided his gaze. The prosecutor called him reckless, accused him of endangering public safety by destabilizing law enforcement operations. They paraded false witnesses, retired officers with clean suits and practiced lies. Louis had proof, but it wasn't enough. The judge dismissed key evidence as prejudicial. The media coverage twisted every word, framing Lewis as controversial, a divisive figure who may have gone too far. But he never raised his voice, never lashed out. He sat there, suit wrinkled from too many nights sleeping on his office couch, hands folded, eyes hollow. He watched people he once trusted twist his motives, as if demanding justice made him the villain. But what cut deepest was watching his mother, sweet, aging, frail, sit in the back row with worry etched into every wrinkle of her face. She believed in him. Always had. And now she watched her only son be dragged through the dirt by the very system he tried to fix. Then came the death threats, voicemails, emails, slurs painted on his office door. Traitor. Thug in a tie. Watch your back? His insurance dropped him. His car was keyed. A brick shattered the window of his small firm's waiting room. Still, he showed up. Still, he fought. Because if he backed down, it would prove them right. And if he kept going, maybe, just maybe, someone else wouldn't have to go through what he was enduring. But even the strongest voices can start to crack. And one night, after a court session that left him humiliated and cornered, he finally whispered to himself, "I don't know if I can keep doing this." He looked in the mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. Gaunt, tired, beaten, and yet burning. There was still fire inside. Not rage, purpose. That's when the letters started coming. Not from lawyers or critics. From people. Real people. A mother in St. Louis whose son had been sentenced without representation. A college student who watched his live streams and said, "You made me believe law could be more than injustice." A retired judge who confessed in ink that he'd seen corruption but never had the courage to speak. They thanked him. They urged him not to give up. "Your voice is our voice," one letter said. Lewis held that note for days, reading it over and over like scripture. When news broke about Officer McKee slapping Judge Ellison, something shifted. The same system that buried Lewis's report now scrambled to act. Suddenly, the public wanted answers. McKee was suspended. Internal Affairs reopened old cases. And for the first time, the blueprint files were cited in a formal hearing. Lewis watched from the back, unnoticed, as others repeated what he had tried to scream for 2 years. No credit, no spotlight. But vindication. Quiet. Steady. Real. That moment, watching the wheels turn finally toward justice, made every sleepless night worth it. But he's not out of the woods. The lawsuit still looms. His bank account is nearly drained. His office has downsized. His mother's medical bills are mounting. His name is still whispered like a warning in legal circles. But he's standing, still telling the truth, and still believing that the next case, the next story, the next courtroom could be the one that tips the scales for good. So if you're hearing this, if Lewis's story moved you, if his fight stirred something in your chest, don't let this be where it ends. Hit the like button. Leave a comment. Tell him you see him. Tell him not to stop. Because right now, the world needs more people like Lewis. People willing to be broken so others can be made whole. People who carry the truth, even when it feels like a weight too heavy for one man. This isn't just his story. It's ours. And if we let it fade, if we scroll past it, ignore it, stay silent, then everything he's endured becomes another warning instead of a turning point. But if we amplify it, if we support it, if we stand beside him, we become part of something that matters. Something bigger than one man, bigger than one courtroom. We become part of a movement that says truth still matters, even when it costs everything. So like this video, drop a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Because we don't tell stories to entertain. We tell them to fight back, with truth at the center. And with people like Lewis Randall leading the way, maybe we've got a chance. They say some people vanish when the pressure gets too real, but not him. Caleb Monroe didn't disappear. He became a shadow with purpose. A ghost with receipts. For years, he was just another IT tech buried inside the Franklin County Records Office. Unnoticed, unimportant, just the guy who reset passwords and fixed broken printers. But what they didn't realize, what no one realized, was that Caleb saw everything. Not just the files, but the buried trails, the deleted emails, the security footage marked corrupted, the chain of approvals that never should have existed. He never planned to get involved. That wasn't his job. But when you spend 3 years quietly patching up a system that eats its own citizens alive, something shifts. Especially the night he opened a flagged request from Officer Dana McKee asking to override a time-stamped report from a traffic stop that resulted in a teenager's hospitalization. It wasn't the first. It wasn't the last. But it was the one that broke him, that made him sit at his desk until 3:47 a.m., eyes burning, staring at the lines of metadata and realizing that what he held in front of him wasn't a glitch. It was a cover-up. The fifth one, all with the same officer's name, all with missing footage, all with sealed outcomes. Caleb knew if he asked questions, they'd shut him down, so he didn't ask. He backed everything up, quietly, thoroughly, over months. Into drives, into cloud vaults, into formats no one but him could decode. He made copies of every file, mapped out every redaction, built a timeline so airtight it practically bled. And then, he disappeared. But not in the way they think. He didn't run to the media. He didn't leak it all at once. He watched, waited. Observed the gears of the machine from the outside like a hawk circling prey. He moved cities, changed his name, took a job sweeping floors in a shipping warehouse just to lay low. He needed distance. He needed them to forget. But he never stopped collecting. Never stopped tracing. Each headline about a new misconduct investigation fed his theory. Each public statement, each evasive press conference, it all confirmed what he feared. This wasn't about one officer. This was an engineered silence. And he held the only map that showed how deep it went. Still, he couldn't act. Not yet. The wrong move and everything would vanish, including him. Then came the slap. The viral footage of Officer Dana McKee striking Judge Marcus Ellison in open court was a lightning rod. The country saw what Caleb had already known. But what they didn't know, what he'd pieced together through sleepless nights and burner laptops, was that McKee wasn't just a rogue officer. She was the enforcement arm of something bigger. And the real data, the real scandal, wasn't about the slap. It was about what she was trying to hide. And Caleb had proof. He slipped back into the county quietly, not as Caleb, but as Leo. No one paid attention to the guy fixing projectors during the local high school board meetings. No one noticed the man at the back of the courthouse gallery, hoodie up, scribbling notes, recording patterns. But behind that anonymity was a man racing a clock. He'd set a fail-safe. If anything happened to him, his entire archive would go public. Every report, every tampered file. But that wasn't enough. He didn't want to just burn the house down. He wanted it rebuilt. So he approached the one person he thought might listen. The one person whose name had started showing up in the right places for the right reasons. Lewis Randall, the civil rights attorney who'd been countersued for exposing corruption. Caleb didn't show up at Lewis's office. He left an envelope on his windshield. Inside, a flash drive, a burner number, and one line written on a torn page from a Franklin County personnel manual. They're not hiding what they did. They're hiding how often they did it. The risk was massive. If he was caught, they wouldn't just fire him. They'd erase him, blacklist him, paint him as unstable, dangerous, a criminal. He'd seen them do it to others. People who tried to speak up and suddenly lost jobs, homes, reputations. So he moved like smoke, never staying anywhere more than 3 nights, never logging into public Wi-Fi, never carrying identification. He hadn't seen his family in over a year. His younger sister thought he was living abroad. His landlord from his old place thought he died. He missed birthdays, funerals, holidays, all for data. All for a truth he wasn't sure the world was even ready to see. But when Louis finally called, his voice low, almost whispering, Caleb knew the time had come. They met in a parking garage, like something out of a movie. No names, no handshakes, just 2 men bound by what they both knew. Louis had already begun building a case, and Caleb's files filled in the missing puzzle pieces. Together, they outlined something staggering. A coordinated pattern of manipulated evidence, forced confessions, digital tampering, dozens of lives shattered, erased, rewritten. But Lewis wanted to go public, and Caleb wasn't ready. "You go to the media," Caleb said, "and they'll spin it. They'll reduce it to a rogue cop and ignore the system behind her." "Then what do we do?" Lewis asked. Caleb stared at the flickering garage light above them. "We wait. We make them come to us." And that's exactly what they did. Slowly, strategically, they leaked breadcrumbs. One damning report at a time. A body cam clip here, a redacted file. Made whole. Each release verified, undeniable. And each time, the public outcry grew louder. McKee was just the beginning. Her fall was dramatic, public. But behind her were others. Names Caleb had traced to sealed settlements, lost court dates, vanished defendants. And one name kept resurfacing. A senior administrator. Caleb hadn't figured out the connection yet, but he felt it. Like a shadow just outside the light. The missing link. The deeper they dug, the more dangerous it became. Louis's office was broken into. Caleb's cloud backups were hacked, but not fully, because Caleb had planned for that. He never kept all the pieces in one place, like a digital mosaic, only he knew how to reassemble it. And he was running out of time. Late one night, while reviewing firewall logs, Caleb saw something that made his blood run cold. An IP trace, government level, scrubbed through proxies, but he recognized the code. It wasn't just a search. Someone was tracking him. Not passively, actively. They were looking for the leak. And they were getting close. He didn't sleep that night. He erased his device, relocated to a storage unit he'd outfitted as a bunker, and wrote what he called the vault letter. A confession, a blueprint, a last resort. If he disappeared, it would explain everything. If he didn't, it would remain buried. The next morning, he got a call from Lewis. "They know," Lewis said. "I know," Caleb replied. "They're trying to subpoena me for the source." "Then let them." "Are you sure?" Caleb didn't hesitate. "If we don't finish this, they'll just start over." The final drop was scheduled for midnight. Everything. All of it. Unfiltered. They prepared for the worst. Caleb sat alone in his bunker, the air heavy, waiting. Not for escape, but for consequences. But something strange happened. Nothing. No knock, no police, no threats. Instead, the next day, headlines exploded. Not about the leak, but about the resignations. A wave of sudden, unexplained departures across the Franklin County chain of command. The files had done their job. Or maybe just the threat of them. Caleb watched from the shadows as the truth took shape, without him needing to show his face. He's still out there, no one knows where. No interviews, no book deals, no credit. Just silence. But not the silence of fear. The silence of someone who did what had to be done and stepped back before the system could drag him under. And now I ask you, what would you say to Caleb? A man who gave up everything to make sure others could live free. A man who walks in the dark so the rest of us can see the truth? Drop a comment. Let him know you see him, that you believe him, that you're with him. Because people like Caleb don't need the spotlight. They need solidarity. And if you felt anything from this story, if it made your heart race or your fists clench, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. We tell the stories others are too afraid to whisper. And this one? This one's for the quiet hero hiding in plain sight. Caleb, wherever you are, we hear you. And we've got your back. They told her to stay quiet, to let it go, that it wasn't her fight. But Harper Lane had never been good at silence, especially when it came to injustice. At 26, she was the youngest black investigative journalist at a regional paper barely surviving off dwindling subscriptions and outdated computers. She didn't care about the prestige. She cared about the truth. And the truth, as she discovered in a dimly lit courthouse storage room, was uglier than she ever expected. It started with a tip. Anonymous, handwritten, almost paranoid. Check the Ellis transcripts. Room 3A. Something was removed. Most reporters would have tossed it. Harper didn't. Not just because it intrigued her, but because she remembered the name Ellis. A boy from Eastbrook arrested in 2020 for felony possession during a raid that found nothing. He was 14. And the charges stuck. Harper remembered his mother crying on the courthouse steps, begging someone to look into it. No one did. Until now. The deeper she dug, the more horrifying it became. Evidence missing. Testimonies altered. Signatures forged. And a pattern, always involving the same group of officers, led by one name she began to see again and again. Dana McKee. Harper remembered the slap when it hit national news, the courtroom clip of a white officer striking a black judge. Everyone talked about the moment, but no one seemed interested in what came before. That's what Harper wanted. The before, the why, the how long. She started making calls, knocking on doors, visiting mothers who never trusted reporters, knocking again after they slammed doors in her face. One woman finally let her in after the 4th visit. She served Harper tea with trembling hands and showed her the arrest photo of her son, 15 years old, bruised and scared, arrested for resisting when all he did was ask why they were stopping him. "McKee," the woman whispered. She looked at him like he didn't deserve to speak. Harper took notes, dozens of them. She created spreadsheets, connected incidents by date, badge number, location. The cases spread across 8 years. Most involved minors. Many ended in plea deals, their innocence bartered away to avoid worse fates. And the court files? Clean, sanitized, manufactured. Harper brought her findings to her editor, who barely glanced at them before shaking his head. "This is a death sentence," he said. "We don't have the budget for a fight with the department." "Dorm?" She left his office with her laptop, her notes, and the sinking feeling that she was on her own. And so she worked in secret. Late nights at coffee shops. Mornings at public libraries. She started wearing hats in public, kept her phone on airplane mode, stopped tagging her location. The moment she filed her first FOIA request, someone tried to access her cloud drive. She changed all her passwords. Then came the texts. Numbers she didn't recognize, messages like, "Wrong house next time," or "You're digging in the wrong grave." Her car was keyed 3 times in 1 week. But the worst moment came when her little brother found her file on the kitchen table. "Is that McKee?" he asked, pointing at the photo. Harper's heart stopped. "Yeah," she said carefully. "Why?" Her brother, barely 18, looked at the page and said, "She pulled me over last year. I didn't tell you. I didn't want you to worry." So that night, Harper sat in her car and cried for the first time in months. Not because she was afraid, but because it had gotten that close. Because the monster she was chasing had already brushed her family. And she'd almost missed it. But instead of stopping her, it lit something inside her she didn't know was still burning. She wasn't just writing this story for the paper anymore. She was writing it for every mother who lost sleep, for every kid who was made to feel like a threat just for existing, for the truth that kept getting buried beneath bureaucracy and lies. So she pushed harder. She tracked down a retired clerk who remembered tampering orders slipped through after hours. She followed a paper trail that led to sealed settlements. Hush money paid out to victims who never spoke again. And through it all, she collected names. Not just victims, but accomplices. Then, one night, she caught someone following her. She ducked into a laundromat, stayed until closing, then sprinted out the back door. She didn't go home that night. She checked into a motel 2 counties over and slept with a baseball bat by the door. She stopped posting on social media. She wiped her phone weekly. She was terrified, but she didn't quit. Months passed, and then something shifted. The courtroom slap resurfaced online after new footage was leaked, an extended version, uncut. In it, you could hear McKee mutter something under her breath before she struck Judge Ellison. Something about knowing his type. That one sentence reignited the fire. Protests resumed. Hashtags trended. And that's when Harper dropped her piece. She didn't go through her newspaper. She uploaded it herself, under an anonymous author tag. The headline was simple. The Pattern They Buried, a journalist's investigation into Officer Dana McKee's career. The piece included scans, timelines, anonymized interviews, documents McKee thought were gone forever. Within 24 hours, it had 1.2 million views. Local news picked it up. Then national. Civil rights groups began citing it. A class action lawsuit was launched. Internal Affairs reopened 18 cases. Dana McKee, already on administrative leave, was formally indicted. And Harper? She sat on the floor of her apartment, laptop in her lap, reading the thousands of comments from strangers, many of them survivors, parents, public defenders, thanking her, crying with her, telling her they'd saved every screenshot in case the story vanished. But the journey didn't end there. Harper finally stepped forward, publicly claiming authorship a week after the story went viral. She was invited to speak at panels, asked to give lectures, offered book deals. She declined most of them. She wasn't interested in turning pain into profit. All she wanted was change. And for the first time in years, she believed it might actually be possible. Now, when Harper walks into a courtroom, people recognize her, not for what she wears, but for what she exposed. The same judges who used to ignore her now ask her questions. And the victims? Some of them have started to smile again, to breathe again, to believe that maybe the truth still matters, that maybe, just maybe, someone out there is willing to risk everything just to tell their story. So if you've made it this far, if Harper's courage moved you, if her fight reminded you of someone you love, drop a comment. Tell her you see her. Tell her you believe in what she did. Because she didn't do it for fame. She did it for people like you. And people like you are the reason she kept going when it would have been so much easier to stop. Like this story, share it. Subscribe to the channel. We bring light to the stories most are too afraid to touch. Stories of truth, of courage, of quiet warriors like Harper Lane who turned her fear into fire and burned a hole through the silence. Everyone thought David Rollins had it easy. He was tall, calm, confident, always composed. A respected school counselor by day and a community mentor by night, he was the kind of man people turned to for advice, but rarely asked about his pain. That was his gift and his curse. He carried other people's burdens so well that no one noticed the weight crushing his own shoulders. But behind the soft-spoken voice and steady hands was a man unraveling in silence. For years, David had worked inside a school district where black and brown students were treated like ticking time bombs, suspended faster, disciplined harsher, forgotten easier. He watched kids as young as 10 labeled as troublemakers for fidgeting, while white students were called restless or gifted. He wrote reports, he raised concerns, he held private meetings with administrators who nodded politely and said, "We'll look into it." They never did, and David, always the professional, just kept showing up, until the day they pushed him too far. It was Jamari, 12 years old, bright, sharp, quick to laugh. He wanted to be an engineer. But one Friday afternoon, Jamari was handcuffed in front of his class for resisting a hallway search he never should have been subjected to. David was in his office when it happened. By the time he got to the hallway, Jamari was crying, blood on his lip, his backpack torn open on the ground. The officer on duty was Dana McKee. She told David the boy had been acting aggressive. But David had already pulled the footage from the security camera behind her back. Jamari hadn't done a thing. Not one aggressive move, not even a raised voice. What he did do was ask, "Why are you searching me?" And that, in their eyes, was the threat. David filed a formal complaint. This time he didn't soften the language. He called it what it was: excessive force, racial targeting, and systemic failure. The next week, his inbox was flooded with HR warnings about inappropriate communication tone. His access to the internal database was suspended for a week. The principal called him into a meeting and said he needed to focus on solutions, not tension. David looked her dead in the eyes and said, "Tension is when a kid bleeds for asking a question." But the blowback didn't stop there. David started getting emails at strange hours, anonymous messages telling him to choose his battles wisely. A student's parent accused him of radicalizing kids. A local blog posted a smear article about his anti-police agenda. He started coming home later and later, walking around the block 3 times before entering his apartment, just to calm the storm inside his chest. His appetite vanished. So did his sleep. His hands began to shake during meetings. He started getting headaches so bad he had to sit in the dark for hours. But he didn't quit. He couldn't. Because Jamari had stopped coming to school, because his mother had transferred him to a district 3 hours away, just to keep him safe. Because David still saw Jamari's sketchbook on his old desk, left behind with blueprints for robots he never got to build. And maybe that's what hurt the most. Not the retaliation, not the rumors, but the empty chair in room 104, where a bright black boy used to sit, who once asked David if justice was real. David wanted to believe it was. So he dug deeper. He contacted old students, parents, colleagues. He started compiling a list of similar incidents going back 10 years. Every stop, every suspension, every unnecessary call to law enforcement, patterns emerged, names overlapped, and in the center of so many reports, Officer Dana McKee. Officer Dana. She'd been reassigned twice, transferred once, and yet she remained. Always assigned to schools with high black student populations. David found redacted documents, missing audio clips, testimonies that contradicted each other. When he tried to submit his findings to the local education board, he was told he'd violated internal protocol and was placed on leave pending review. They said it was standard procedure, but he knew it was punishment. He lost his badge, his school key, his emails were cut off. And suddenly, the man who was once called a role model was now seen as a threat. Former colleagues stopped replying to his texts. One even blocked him outright. "I can't afford to be dragged into this," she wrote before disappearing. David began attending meetings alone, taking notes with pen and paper, wearing clothes a little more wrinkled than usual because he no longer had the energy to iron them. His mother called more often. She heard the change in his voice. "You sound far away," she said. "Are you okay?" And he always lied. "I'm just tired, Ma. Just tired." But in truth, he was broken. Waking up each morning with the weight of knowing how easily systems forget the people they hurt, how easily they erase the helpers, too. He thought about walking away, many times, packing up and moving someplace quiet, away from courtrooms and policies and nightmares that replayed over and over. But then, something shifted. The slap. The viral video of Officer McKee striking Judge Marcus Ellison in open court set the internet on fire. For the first time, her name was everywhere. But while most people focused on the moment, the slap itself, David saw something else. He saw validation, proof, a face, a crack in the armor of someone who had moved with impunity for years. And suddenly, his evidence mattered. Journalists started reaching out. Civil rights organizations asked to see his notes. He was invited to testify at a community review board. And this time, he didn't show up in a tie and blazer. He showed up in the same shirt he wore the day Jamari was cuffed. And when he spoke, he didn't read from prepared notes. He told them the truth. About the hallway, about the blood, about the sketchbook, about the silence that followed. The board didn't interrupt him. No one told him to stop. For the first time in months, he felt heard. And when he finished, he looked out at the crowd and saw Jamari's mother sitting in the back, tears on her face, holding her son's old sketchbook in her lap. That moment broke something open inside David. The pain didn't disappear, but the isolation did. The review board ruled in favor of a full investigation. The school district issued a public apology for the incident involving Jamari. Officer McKee was barred from returning to any school campus pending further legal action. And David? He was reinstated. Without fanfare, without celebration. Just a quiet email saying his leave had ended. But he didn't go back right away. He needed time. He needed healing. He needed to remember who he was before the system tried to erase him. He's rebuilding. Slowly. Speaking at town halls, consulting with youth advocacy groups. He started a small foundation in Jamari's name, helping kids get access to STEM programs and legal literacy. He doesn't seek credit. He still battles anxiety. Still wakes up some nights thinking he's being followed. But he's no longer invisible. And now you know the truth. Not the headlines, not the sound bites, but the full weight of what David Rollins endured. So one day, kids like Jamari wouldn't have to. So, if this story reached you, if David's quiet strength and unbreakable heart moved something in yours, drop a comment. Let him know you're standing with him, that his pain wasn't for nothing, that his fight is your fight, too. Like this story. Share it. Subscribe to the channel, because we don't just tell stories. We honor them. We amplify them. And we remind the world that even in the darkest silence, someone is still out there speaking up for the ones too young, too scared, or too tired to speak for themselves. And the end. It wasn't the articles or the headlines or the statistics that changed things. It was the courage of one woman who refused to give up, even when the world told her to. Harper Lane didn't set out to become a symbol. She wasn't chasing fame or a book deal or some fleeting online attention. All she ever wanted was the truth, to chase it, protect it, and give it back to the people who'd had it stolen from them. And in doing so, she gave us something much more than a story. She gave us a blueprint for what it means to stand up when standing still is the easier choice. Her work had finally made its way into a national task force review. Her reporting helped lead to reopened cases, new bias protocols in school systems, and the firing, not just suspension, of multiple officers who'd operated in darkness for far too long. But even more than that, her story lit a fire inside a generation of listeners who had grown numb to injustice. And now, as the dust settles and the spotlight shifts to the next headline, Harper is still doing what she always did, quietly, consistently, bravely, giving voice to the stories that others look away from. She didn't vanish into fame. She stayed with the work. That's who she is. That's who she always was. Now, when people talk about Harper Lane, they don't just talk about the viral exposé or the risk she took confronting a police system that had protected one of its most abusive officers. They talk about her tenacity, her humanity, how she went door to door in neighborhoods others were too scared to visit, just to hear stories that would otherwise be buried under silence. They talk about the nights she sat with grieving mothers and trembling teens, not as a journalist, but as someone who cared enough to listen. They talk about how, even when she was threatened, stalked, and harassed, she didn't disappear. She didn't back down. And they talk about the people whose lives were changed because she stayed in the fight, even when it meant she had to walk it alone. But most importantly, they talk about what we all can take from her journey. Not just inspiration, but a call to action. Because Harper's story reminds us of something we all need to hear. That sometimes the world won't clap for you when you're doing the right thing. Sometimes the work will feel thankless, exhausting, lonely. And sometimes people will actively try to tear you down because the truth you carry threatens the comfort they've grown used to. But you keep going. You hold the line. Because the people who benefit from that truth, the people who needed someone to believe in them, to fight for them, to see them, they're worth every step of the struggle. Harper didn't have a massive platform when she started. She didn't have funding or a team. She had a laptop, a notepad, and the kind of heart that doesn't look away when things get hard. And from that, a movement grew. So what's the lesson for us? It's this. You don't need to be famous to make a difference. You don't need millions of followers or a powerful title. You just need conviction, compassion, and the courage to act, even when your hands are shaking. Whether you're fighting injustice, raising your kids, working 3 jobs to keep food on the table, or simply trying to be a better human day by day, your effort matters. It counts. And one day, someone will look back and say, I'm here because that person didn't give up. Maybe that person will be you. Harper taught us that journalism isn't about clicks. It's about connection. Her words helped restore hope where despair had taken root. She reminded us that behind every statistic is a person, a student like Jamari, a mother like Deidre, a boy in cuffs who was simply trying to explain himself. And because Harper cared enough to follow those stories to their ends, some of those kids are smiling again. Some of those families are healing. Some of those wrongs are finally being righted. Not all. Not yet. But enough to make a difference. And in a world so often drenched in apathy, that difference means everything. Now, Harper's Foundation is up and running. The Jamari Project, named after the boy who sparked her mission. It provides legal resources and academic mentorship to students in underfunded schools who've been targeted or profiled. She doesn't run it from a skyscraper or a glossy office, just a donated community space in the back of a library where she meets with families, trains young writers, and makes sure no child ever goes unheard again. Quietly, humbly, powerfully. So, if Harper's journey moved you, if you felt your chest tighten when she cried in her car outside the courthouse, or you held your breath as she was threatened and isolated for simply doing her job. If you felt angry for the kids who never got justice, or proud when her article shattered a wall of silence, then take a moment right now to show her that her fight wasn't in vain. Like this video. Leave a comment to support Harper. Let her know you stand with her, that her voice matters, that her courage inspired yours. And if you want more stories like this, real stories, about real people who step into fire for the sake of others, subscribe to the channel. This is what we do here. We tell the stories others are too afraid to tell. We follow the truth, even when it's inconvenient, even when it hurts, because the only way the world changes is when someone refuses to look away. And we promise we'll never look away. Harper Lane didn't save the whole world, but she lit up her corner of it, and that's enough. That's more than enough. Now it's our turn to carry the light forward.